Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The storm had passed, but the sky still glowed with fractured color. Bruised purples and faded oranges streaked across the upper atmosphere. The earth below was quiet, almost reverent, like something had broken and not quite healed. Captain Elias. Ward moved carefully through the underbrush, his boots sinking slightly into the damp moss. His ship, the Reverie, hovered just out of view, lights dimmed, cloaked. He didn't want to alert anyone. Not yet. The distress beacon had been faint, fragmented, almost accidental, but it was real. His visor scrolled data across his right eye. The biosign was close, organic, warm, and unfamiliar. Still no match in the system, the AI in his helmet murmured. Readings suggest non-human origin, minimal threat levels. Elias crouched near a splintered tree trunk, scanning the clearing ahead. Steam still hissed from the cracked soil where some sort of pod or vessel had impacted. And then movement. His breath hitched. Just beyond the wreckage, partially hidden beneath crystalline branches, a figure stirred. Small-framed, slumped forward, glowing softly at the edges, like her skin was catching light from somewhere inside her. Not white, not blue, something other, something beautiful. She was trying to stand, failing. "Hey," Elias whispered, stepping out slowly, both hands up. "Easy, I'm not here to hurt you." The alien girl turned her head with effort, eyes wide and unfocused. Her face was smeared with ash, and silvery blood dripped from a shallow cut near her temple. Her breathing was ragged, sharp gasps that sounded more like glass breaking than air passing through lungs. Her lips parted. She made a sound, delicate, layered, like several tones overlapping in a single word. Elias couldn't make sense of it, but it was filled with pain and fear. He knelt a few paces away, leaving space. "I got your signal. You called for help. I answered. That's all." She blinked slowly, and for the first time really looked at him. Something passed between them, not understanding, not yet, but something. He reached toward his chest slowly and unclipped his med pack, setting it on the ground between them. The container hissed open, releasing a clean scent. Cooling gel, oxygen stabilizers, tissue foam. "I'm a rescue pilot," Elias said softly, trying not to choke on the knot in his throat. "Search and recovery. You're hurt. I want to help." Her fingers twitched. She glanced down at her arm, burned badly, skin peeling at the edges, glowing embers just beneath the surface. Whatever species she was, her biology was failing fast. Her mouth moved again. This time the word, if it was a word, sounded almost like Solari, a name, a plea. He moved a little closer, then paused. "I'm Elias, Captain Elias Ward. Solari, is that you? Your name?" She didn't respond, but her gaze shifted slightly. Something softened in her expression. Her mouth moved once more. "Solari," she whispered again, this time almost human-sounding, almost tender, as if speaking the word gave her strength. He took it as a yes. "Okay, Solari." He smiled gently. "That's beautiful." She shuddered, chest rising unevenly. Her legs gave out entirely, and she dropped into the dirt with a gasp. Elias didn't wait. He crossed the remaining distance and caught her before she hit the ground. She was warm, burning, almost, like holding a star wrapped in skin. Her hand gripped his jacket weakly. "I've got you," he murmured, arms sliding around her carefully. "You're okay now, I've got you." She looked up at him, eyes swimming with tears, or maybe light. Her lips trembled. Her body trembled. "I know, it hurts," he said. "Just stay with me, let me fix this." She tilted her head, trying to understand his words, but the meaning was already in his voice. He applied the cooling gel to the wound on her side. She cried out, high-pitched and metallic like a broken wind chime. Her grip on him tightened. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Her hand, so small in his, reached up and brushed the side of his face, trembling. The gesture was gentle, uncertain, as if to ask, "Why are you helping me?" He closed his eyes. He thought of his little sister, Ava, thought of the fire. Thought of how no one came in time. No one deserves to die alone, he whispered, not even light years from home, and in that moment, Solari leaned her head against his chest. Something changed. He didn't know what it was, but it was real. The comm in his ear buzzed sharply. "Captain Ward, come in. We're registering movement in your quadrant. Report status. Is the signal confirmed alien?" He stared ahead, heart pounding. His hand hovered over the comm switch. Protocol said yes. Report and retreat. Alert command. Isolate the subject. But Solari, she was still clinging to him. He lowered his hand. "Nothing to report," he said finally, voice low. "Signal's gone. It was debris." "Copy that. Return when ready." He cut the channel. Solari stirred in his arms, eyes searching. His face, "No more signals," he said quietly. "No more alarms. Just me, just you." A long silence fell over the clearing. Above them, stars began to blink through the thinning clouds. She traced a trembling line across his chest, with one glowing finger. Her species symbol, maybe. Or a word. Or simply, a thank you. He didn't. No, but somehow, he understood. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Elias pulled the emergency blanket from his pack and wrapped it gently around Solari's shaking form. Her breathing slowed. Her hand remained in his. He didn't know what came next, but neither of them were alone anymore. They moved slowly through the forest, Elias guiding her step by step, arm steady around her waist. Solari leaned into him, her energy dimmed but steady, her breath shallow and rhythmic like a song playing quietly underwater. The air was cooler now, mist curled around their feet as if the ground itself was holding its breath. Elias glanced down at her. "We're not far. My ship's just beyond that ridge." Solari didn't answer, but her fingers curled tighter into the sleeve of his jacket. Her body language was unsure, her movements careful, like someone used to being hunted, not helped. She stopped suddenly, pulling away from him slightly. Her eyes scanned the trees, her ears twitching toward some distant, invisible threat. Elias followed her gaze. "What is it?" She didn't speak. Instead, she took a sharp step forward, then winced and dropped to her knees with a small cry. He was at her side in seconds. "Whoa, hey, it's okay, you're still healing, you shouldn't—" She shook her head. Her hands glowed faintly now, swirling with tiny, flickering orbs of light. Her fingers trembled as she drew a symbol in the dirt, spirals within spirals. Elias tilted his head. "What is that?" She looked at him, then tapped her chest. "Zythra." Her voice was fragile, the word shaped like something sacred. "Zythra?" he repeated, trying to match the cadence. Solari nodded, then pointed at him, and then the symbol again. He stared at the symbol, then back at her. "It's both of us?" She smiled faintly, nodded again. He felt something strange in his chest, like gravity pulling inward, like the universe had just shifted half an inch. "Okay," he whispered. "Zythra." They stayed like that for a moment, her kneeling, him crouched beside her, hands nearly touching in the dirt. A pair of strangers tracing meaning from silence. Then Solari looked at the sky, where a satellite glided silently above the clouds. Her expression darkened. "What is it?" Elias asked. She didn't answer with words this time. She closed her eyes, and suddenly he saw, not in images, not clearly but in flashes, smoke, screams. A cold metal room, hands reaching for her, light pouring from her body as restraint snapped. Then silence. "Hand flight." He jerked back, gasping. She opened her eyes slowly, apologetically. "You showed me that," Elias said, stunned. Solari lowered her head, embarrassed, ashamed. "No," he said quickly. "Don't do that. I'm not afraid of you." She glanced up, uncertain. "I should be," he added with a half smile. "You've got psychic projection. And maybe, plasma in your blood. That's a little intimidating." She blinked, confused, then laughed. It was a soft, musical laugh, surprised by its own existence. She put a hand over her mouth. Elias laughed too, caught off guard by how warm it felt. "You're not what I expected," he said gently. "You're not just some distress signal. You're something else." Her expression turned serious. She reached toward his face again, hesitant. He didn't flinch. Her fingertips brushed his cheek, cooler now, calmer. She touched the scar just under his eye, then tilted her head as if asking this. He nodded slowly. "Combat mission, pirate ambush, bad intel." She frowned, clearly displeased. He chuckled. "Yeah, I wasn't too happy about it either." She kept her hand there for a moment longer, as if memorizing the shape of him. Then lowered it with care. They stood again, together this time, closer. As they crested the hill, the ship came into view, the Reverie rising like a gleaming bird from the mist. The ramp was already lowered. Lights along the hull shimmered in soft teal. Elias turned to her. "You sure you trust me?" Solari looked up at him, blinking slowly. Then she extended her hand, palm up, not just to be helped, to offer herself. A gesture of choice. He stared at it for a second, then took it. Her skin was warmer now, not burning, alive. And for the first time in a long time, Elias felt it too. Alive, connected. Not drifting alone through space, but anchored. Together, they walked into the ship, leaving the forest, the wreckage, and the ghosts of war behind them. But not the danger. Not yet. The inside of the Reverie was quiet, soft hums and clicks of the ship's systems filling the space. Elias led Solari through the narrow hallway, his hand guiding her lightly on the small of her back. Every step seemed to echo in the emptiness. Her eyes were wide, taking in everything. The smooth metallic walls, the blinking consoles, the screens, displaying data in foreign alien languages. Elias stopped at a small alcove with a medical bay. The cold, sterile white of the room made Solari flinch slightly, and her eyes darted to the small surgical instruments, neatly arranged on the counter. "Not a fan of the med bay?" Elias asked, trying to make light of it. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then she slowly shook her head. "I'm not going to hurt you," he promised, trying to reassure her. "It's just a checkup. You're safe here." Her gaze flickered over to the nearby table, where a soft, padded chair awaited. Her hands hovered uncertainly. "I know it's not exactly home," he added, softening his voice, "but I'll be with you the whole time. You can trust me." There was a long pause before she nodded faintly, a small gesture that meant everything. She stepped toward the chair, sitting down carefully. Elias moved to the side console, pulling up her medical readings. "I'll just check your vitals, make sure the burns are healing properly." He noticed that her breathing had become steadier, but there was still something off in the way her body moved, too stiff, too cautious. He took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. "Hey, you're doing great. You've come a long way already," Solari met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the ship's lights. Her hand reached up again, but this time it wasn't for his face. She gently touched her chest, then extended her hand towards him. It was an offer. Something silent, something that needed no words. Elias hesitated, then took her hand again. The contact felt more profound now, heavier with the weight of what they had shared. The bond was there, undeniable. Something beyond. Just rescue and survival. There was an understanding between them, fragile yet real. She closed her eyes briefly, leaning slightly into him. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "You're not like them." He froze, confused. "What do you mean?" Her eyes opened, locking onto his. There was sadness there, not just for herself, but for him too. She drew another symbol in the air with her free hand, swirls intricate and delicate, like a pattern woven from the stars themselves. Elias watched, fascinated. "You're not like them," she repeated, more firmly this time, tapping her chest as if to emphasize the meaning. He took a moment to process her words, realizing that she was referring to the people who had harmed her, perhaps the ones who hunted her, the ones she had fled from. They were the them in her mind, the ones who had caused all the pain, the fear. Elias knelt in front of her, his face level with hers. "I promise you," he said softly, "I'm not like them. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help you, for as long as you need." Solari studied his face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Her hand tightened slightly in his. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Let's get you comfortable. There's no rush." Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but the words weren't there. The silence between them grew, and Elias could feel the weight of it, the depth. It wasn't awkward. It was intimate, a shared moment of vulnerability. And then she spoke, her voice small but clear. "I don't know how to stay." His heart twisted at the simple admission. She didn't know how to stay in this moment, here, with him. It wasn't just about survival, for her anymore. It was about trust, about being seen. He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to know how, Solari. You just have to be here. I've got you." Her eyes softened, a glimmer of something deeper in her gaze. And for the first time, Elias saw it, the flicker of hope, not just for survival, but for something more, something that could be. But then, her expression shifted. A faint tremor ran through her, and her gaze flickered toward the viewport. The stars outside were endless, cold. Elias followed her line of sight, a lump forming in his throat. He knew the stars out there. They were both a promise and a prison. The universe was vast, too vast, and they were both alone in it. Her fingers tightened around his. "Will I be hunted here?" Her voice was barely a whisper, barely audible. Elias hesitated. The question was simple, but the weight behind it was crushing. "No," he said firmly. "Not anymore." She looked up at him again, searching his eyes as if trying to decide whether to believe him. The universe had taught her not to trust, to survive at all costs. But here in the silence of his ship, with his hand in hers, there was no pretense, only truth. He stayed there, holding her gaze until the tremor in her body faded. Slowly she leaned into him again, as if the world outside could be forgotten for a moment. And for Elias, it was the same. Everything outside that ship, the rest of the galaxy, faded away. They were just two people in this vast, lonely universe, together. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant undercurrent in the quiet. It was late or early, depending on how you looked at it. Elias had never been a fan of sleep in space. Too many nights spent staring at the stars, thinking about everything he'd lost, and wondering if anyone else in the universe was feeling as lost as he was. Tonight, however, he wasn't alone. Solari had fallen asleep in the small room they'd set up for her, curled into a blanket. Her breathing was steady now, less strained, but every so often she would stir, her brow furrowing as if the nightmares from her past were still chasing her, even in her sleep. Elias stood in the doorway, watching her. He had been told once that people in distress always felt the most comfortable with silence, and he'd learned that the hard way. There were times when words didn't matter. You just needed to be there. Slowly, he stepped into the room and pulled up a chair. He didn't say anything, just sat. Minutes passed, and the silence between them was the kind that spoke volumes. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was the quiet that came when you knew someone well enough to understand their fears without needing to hear them out loud. Solari shifted again in her sleep. This time she gasped softly, a cry that broke through the calm. "Solari," Elias whispered, his voice low, cautious. Her eyes snapped open, wide and alert, as though she had been thrust out of a nightmare. Her chest heaved in panic, and for a split second she looked like she might bolt. Elias was on his feet in an instant. "Hey, it's okay, it's just me." She blinked at him, still disoriented, her body tense. Her breath was rapid, shallow, like she was caught in a storm she couldn't escape. "You're safe," he repeated, softer this time. He sat down beside her on the bed, careful not to crowd her. Solari's hand reached for his, almost without thinking. He didn't pull away, didn't hesitate. He simply took her hand and let her squeeze it, her fingers trembling against his palm. She closed her eyes again, letting out a shaky breath. "I didn't mean to—" "No need to apologize," Elias interrupted gently. You don't need to explain. There was a long pause. She seemed to be gathering herself as though she were trying to put together the shattered pieces of something broken, something from her past that still haunted her. She spoke again, her voice quieter now, but still carrying the weight of years of pain. It's hard to let go. He nodded, understanding more than she realized. I get it. There was no judgment in his words, only acceptance. Solari turned to face him, her gaze searching his eyes. She opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something more, but the words wouldn't come. Her lips trembled, and a soft, broken sigh escaped her. She looked away, afraid to show the depths of her vulnerability. Elias leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to hide from me. I'm not going anywhere. She looked back at him then, her eyes wide with something like disbelief, but also a spark of hope. Slowly, tentatively, she reached up, her hand brushing the side of his face, almost like a question. He held still, letting her take the lead, letting her decide how much trust she was willing to give. Her fingers lingered on his skin, tracing the scar under his eye again. You're different, she murmured. So different from the others. Elias chuckled softly. I'm not so sure about that, he said, his voice laced with self-deprecating humor. I've been in my fair share of trouble. But you stay, she said, a quiet strength in her words. You don't leave. He looked at her, surprised. You think I'd leave? Her eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, he saw the shadows of old scars. I thought that's what everyone did. Leave. Elias shook his head. Not me. I'm not leaving you, Solari. She studied his face as if weighing the truth in his eyes. After a long pause, she finally nodded, a small but meaningful gesture. Okay. Her hand dropped from his face, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the silence felt heavier this time, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just the weight of two people who were starting to understand each other on a level deeper than words. Finally, Solari spoke, her voice low but steady. I don't know how to live without looking over my shoulder. It's always been fight or run. Elias looked at her, his brow furrowed. I understand, but maybe it's time to stop running. She hesitated. What if I can't? You can, he said with quiet conviction. I won't let you fall, not while I'm here. Her eyes softened, and a small tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She let it fall like a quiet surrender. He reached out, gently wiping it away with his thumb. His touch was tender, careful not to break the fragile moment between them. You're not alone anymore, Solari. She didn't reply, but the way she looked at him, like she was seeing him for the first time, said everything. The tension between them had shifted, softened. She trusted him more than she had moments before, and he knew deep down that this was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Elias leaned back in his chair, watching her with a quiet smile. Get some rest, he said gently. You're safe here. Solari nodded, her eyes drifting shut once more. Her hand, still resting in his, squeezed softly like a silent thank you, and for the first time since they met, Elias didn't feel the loneliness of the stars pressing in on him, not with her by his side. The stars outside the reverie shimmered in a soft dance of light, their quiet beauty reflected in the viewport. Elias stood by the controls, watching the patterns shift. The ship was heading toward an uncharted system, a safe place at least for now. But there was still a weight in his chest. They both carried it, though neither of them spoke about it. Solari entered the cockpit, her footsteps light but purposeful. The dark circles under her eyes had softened, but there was still a hint of wariness in her movements. She hesitated at the door, looking at Elias with a quiet expression. Hey, she said, her voice low, but there was something different in it now, a strength, an unspoken understanding between them. Elias turned, sensing the shift in her presence. Hey, what's on your mind? Solari stepped closer, standing just beside him. She didn't need to sit or touch anything. She was content just being here, beside him. I've been thinking, she started, her gaze wandering over the stars, about trust, and you. He watched her, waiting for her to continue. Her voice dropped a little lower, and for a moment, Elias wondered if she was talking more to herself than to him. I don't know how to be here, to stay. I don't know how to trust someone when everything in me tells me to run. Elias stood still, letting her words hang between them. He could feel the weight of her past pressing against her, the fear that still clung to her. It wasn't just the people who had hunted her. It was the life she had lived, always on edge, always afraid. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was simple, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to get her to look up at him. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Not here, not with me. Solari's lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but she held back. The words were right there, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to say them. Instead, she turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his face. I don't know what happens next, she admitted, but I think I want to find out. Elias smiled softly. It wasn't much, but it was something, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to stay. Then we'll figure it out together, he said, his voice steady, a quiet promise in the space between them. We don't need to have all the answers, just one step at a time. Solari nodded slowly, her eyes drifting to his hand, still resting beside hers. Without thinking, she reached out and took it, her fingers curling around his. The gesture was small, but it felt monumental. For a moment, neither of them moved. They didn't need to speak, the connection between them was enough. But then Solari leaned in, just slightly, and for the first time, Elias could see the vulnerability in her eyes. It wasn't the guarded kind she had worn since they met. This was different, softer. She was letting him in. I'm scared, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias squeezed her hand gently, his heart aching for her. It's okay to be scared, but you don't have to be alone in it. The words hung in the air, the weight of them filling the space between them. Solari closed her eyes briefly, taking a slow breath before she looked up at him again. There was something raw and open in her gaze now. I'm not alone anymore, am I? He shook his head, his hand holding hers even tighter. Not while. I'm here. And with that, something shifted in the room. The ship's soft hum seemed louder now, as if the universe itself had paused, watching this moment unfold. Solari's lips curled into a tentative smile. It wasn't much, but to Elias it was everything. Thank you, she said quietly, for staying. He let out a soft breath, his chest lighter than it had been in weeks. I've been lost in space for too long. I don't plan on being lost anymore. For a long time they stood there side by side, looking out into the stars. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The weight of the moment was enough. The bond between them had deepened, quiet but unbreakable. In that silence, they both knew it was no longer just survival that kept them together. It was something. More something they hadn't fully defined yet, but felt in every glance, every touch. And though the future was still uncertain, for the first time, neither of them felt like they were walking alone. The engines of the Reverie hummed softly as it drifted into the orbit of a new planet. Its surface was a mix of lush green and rugged terrain, a place of peace amidst the chaos of the galaxy. It was a place they could begin anew if they wanted. Elias stood by the viewport, looking out at the blue and green world below. His thoughts were tangled, but there was a clarity now, something that had eluded him for so long. He wasn't just a soldier or a survivor anymore. He was something more, something whole, because of her. Behind him, Solari entered the cockpit, her footsteps quiet but purposeful. The tension between them had always been there, unspoken, but tonight it felt different. There was an unvoiced promise hanging in the air, of beginning, of trust, of a future that didn't involve running. She moved to stand beside him, close enough for their shoulders to brush. Is this it? She asked, her voice quiet, almost uncertain. Elias glanced at her, then back to the planet. His voice was steady, but there was a deep warmth behind it. It could be, if you want it to be. Her gaze shifted from the stars to him, searching his face. She seemed to be looking for something, maybe reassurance, maybe the certainty that they were in this together, no matter what came next. Do you think we'll ever be truly safe? She asked. her voice carrying a trace of the fear that still lingered in her. He turned to face her fully, his eyes soft but firm. "We'll never be free of the past completely, but I think we can be free of running. Together." Solari's eyes glistened with something close to tears, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, like stars in the night, sky marking something profound, something healing. "I'm scared," she said again, her voice barely audible. Elias reached out, his hand brushing her cheek gently. He tilted her chin up so their eyes met. His gaze filled with an emotion that had no words. "You don't have to be scared anymore," he whispered. There was a long pause as Solari closed her eyes, the weight of her emotions too much to carry, all at once. When she opened them again, she took a small step closer, and without saying a word, she reached for his hand. Elias didn't hesitate. His fingers intertwined with hers, the connection so simple yet so profound. She looked at him with something unspoken in her eyes, a bond that had been built in the quiet moments, the long silences, the small acts of kindness. There was nothing dramatic about it. It was just two souls finding a piece of peace in a galaxy that had always felt too big. "I think," Solari started, her voice a little unsure but gaining strength with every word. "I think we can try to be something more than just survivors, more than just the things we were before." Elias nodded, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "I'd like that." They stood there for a long moment, hands still linked, gazing out at the planet below. It was beautiful. The stars were beautiful. The future, whatever it held, was theirs to discover together. As the ship drifted into the calm of the unknown, there was a sense of peace between them, like they had reached a place beyond all the hurt, all the fear. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments of struggle. But they would face it together, and that was enough. Solari turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. "Thank you for staying." Elias smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together." She leaned in then, just enough to rest her forehead against his, and for a brief moment everything else faded away, the danger, the uncertainty, the past. It was just the two of them, in that quiet space at peace. As they stood there side by side, nothing else mattered. They had found something worth holding on to, something worth fighting for. They had found each other, and in a universe as vast and lonely as theirs, that was enough. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves powerful tales from distant worlds. Don't forget to like, and let us know in the comments, what would you have done?